Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Kinsey, and I'm joining you from the Strive Group in Anchorage, Alaska. Welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is on family matters. For those of you who are trying to juggle work and parenting, or maybe taking care of other people in your workplace, or schoolwork for that matter at home, today's session is for you. I'm joined today with Woodrie Burich. And Woodrie's been with us for a variety of sessions here in our daily webinars. And she's talked about resilience, she's talked about mindfulness, she's talked about all sorts of things. Lord knows what's on her mind today as she provides her insights and her guidance on how you can better manage working from home and taking care of yourself and others at the same time. So I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to Woodrie. You can visit our website at thestrivegroup.com for this webinar as it's on playback and any other previously recorded sessions. You can also find a variety of other resources out on that website, so please visit it. If you're joining us live today, you'll notice that there's a chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. And feel free to type in a question for Woodrie or an observation or a comment, and I will gently interrupt her as she goes throughout her content today to make sure that she knows that you've joined the conversation. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Woodrie. And Woodrie, just so you know, I'm going to pop off my camera so I'm not distracting you in any way, shape, or form. But when you see me pop back on, it's because there's an observation or a question for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Heather. I really appreciate it. So welcome, and thank you for taking a little bit of time to talk about something really, really important that we're all, if any of us are parents, most of us probably on this call are parents, that we're all dealing with. I have a 7-year-old daughter, so that's some of my background in understanding how to navigate this work-life balance, which we seem to have had even prior to COVID, but it seems to be amped up a little bit, I think, in the last few months. So looking forward to talking with you all about that. A little bit of background with me. So my background is in information technology. I've been in sales and technology for almost 20 years now, and I started getting really into stress management and finding ways to support myself in the workplace about 10, 15 years ago. And I started speaking to organizations and coaching in this space off and on for about the last 10 years. So specifically in the space of work boundaries, stress management, how to manage all the workload that we have within our work environments while still maintaining some semblance of self in the midst of all of it. So that's a little bit about me. And then we'll dive right in to that first slide. Heather, I think we're waiting for that first slide, or at least I can't see it yet.
How's that, Woodrie? Can you see that now?
I can't see it yet on my slide, no?
Oh,
I can talk
that's
to it.
So, seem to be having some difficulties. So we've got the balancing act. Is there really such a thing as a work-life balance?
Yeah, so, and I've got the other slides behind me, so I have access to them. I just don't know if the people can see them, but I'll talk to it. How about that while you work the screen? How does that sound? Awesome.
Perfect.
So, so balancing act, right? Is there really such a thing as work-life balance? There's a lot of rumblings on this. If you do some Google searches or something along those lines, there's a lot of different perspectives on. Thank you, Heather. I see it now. So there's a lot of different perspectives on work-life balance. There's a lot of folks who say that there's no such thing anymore as work-life balance, and that there never was. There's other folks who say that it's not about a balance, it's about an integration. And that there's no way to balance something because in essence you're taking time or presence from one bucket and putting it in another bucket, so you can't really get everything to work. It's never going to happen. I have the tendency to think that it's really more about semantics. You know, balance, if that's a word that works for you, great. For me, it works. For me, I think about balance. Am I feeling aligned right now? Am I feeling present right now? And I'm feeling here right now. Am I feeling well balanced internally? I also think about it from the perspective of integration. You know, I own the integration group, and there was a very distinct reason why I chose the name the integration group, because I was also searching for that within my work life, right? Some way to really feel consistent when I went from work to home to different locations in my life so that I wasn't constantly feeling stretched. Um, so for me, over the years, as I've played with this concept of balance, it's shifted from am I balanced, am I feeling integrated, to really what are the needs of this moment? Really simple, right? Just kind of backing off of all of the questioning and just into what are the needs of the moment. Sometimes the needs of the moment as a working parent are mama needs a break. Sometimes that's just very real, right? It's very authentic. And sometimes I need a walk. Sometimes I look at my needs and I say, okay, well, I need this. There's other times though, where we have needs of like a newborn, a very young child, where their needs take precedent. They just do. And there are time periods where that is very important and very vital, right? You can't let a newborn's needs go by the wayside. Those are just the times where parents need more support. So for me, I oftentimes sit back and I look for trends. So over a long period of time as a parent, if I'm working and I'm really feeling stretched and thin, right, with all my time and all my demands, what's my trend? Am I consistently feeling frazzled? Am I consistently feeling overwhelmed? Or is it just moment by moment? Do I have golden moments, right? Do I have moments of pure joy, and can I find ways to extend those out? Those are kind of some of the things that I think about as a working parent. And we'll get into some tools and different tips and techniques for that. So what are some tips to address sporadic working and things that separating times that happen with home life and work life? So I know for myself right now, working from home, and I've worked from home off and on for years, but the amount of working from home the last few months has been really intense, right? Because a lot of us are working from home most of the time, unless we happen to be first responders. So how are we managing that? And how do we manage those sporadic starts and stops of work and starts and stops of engaging with a 7-year-old? And, for many of us, more than one kid. And it's hard. The truth is there's a lot of difficulty with it. What I find for myself, what seems to help most is having very designated times, very specific start and end times. The very first thing that we did, the very first week that we knew that we were going to be home for a long period of time, was I organized a schedule for ourselves and I put it all out on a piece of paper. I organized it for myself because I'm working from home, my partner's working from home, my husband and my daughter, and I organized those lists according to some sort of rhythm, some sort of schedule, so that we could all kind of keep in touch with it. So he could work for a little bit, have undisturbed work. I'd work somewhere else where my daughter was around me, so I'd have a little bit of work, but she could come and interrupt me, and then we'd swap. And I put a list, a copy of those lists are actually on my website, and they're free downloadables if anybody wants anything like that. Those proved very, very useful for our family. We use them consistently.
So an observation just came in, Woodrie, about the schedule thing. So one, it was a thank you for saying that there's nothing wrong with putting some structure into things, even if it's not generally in your nature. And so, but then the follow-up to that was a question about the swapping. So if how would you balance if you're on the schedule where you're allowing for some interruptible time, right? So you're making yourself available, in your case, to a 7-year-old, but some of us, it's teenagers, or some of us, it's infants. How do you reconcile that if you're an hourly employee and your employer is expecting that is dedicated work time? So how do you reconcile when there may be interruptions during that 2-hour block of time?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. Thank you for that. So a couple things that I think of. One is that for me, it's all about intent. A lot of times my daughter would interrupt me on occasion, but I also think at the workplace, we get interrupted too, right? We go and grab a cup of coffee, we go and stretch our legs, we go use a restroom break. Sometimes, you get 15 minutes. What is it? 15 minutes every 2 hours. So, be gentle with yourself. I also think employers right now, there's been a lot of postings, actually. I've been seeing a lot of them on LinkedIn. I've also seen them a lot online. Work with your management and your supervisor directly. Express some of the situation that's at hand, and I think that goes a long way. Having clear expectations and setting those openly is a big thing. And then otherwise, what I do is we set specific times. I set a timer. We'll turn the kitchen timer on for my daughter, so she knows she has this period of time that she has to occupy herself, and that gives me a full focus time so that I can fully focus on what I'm doing. Hopefully, that's helpful.
Yes, I'm sure that it was. And I've advanced the slide, so I'm just popping in just to make sure that you've seen it. And I also noticed that I have a typo in there. So you do spell avoid with an A, not two O's. That's my fault, not Woodrie's fault. Don't hold it against her. So.
No worries. Thanks, Heather. Yeah, so how do we juggle work and family and home duties without being overwhelmed? Well, I think the biggest thing that is helpful in this space is really taking a look at when we multitask versus when we single task. So multitasking is really fascinating. If you do any research on multitasking, you'll learn that there's no real such thing as multitasking to begin with. There's actually only task switching, our brain going back and forth from task to task to task to task, which is in many ways why this has been such a challenging time for a lot of us who are working from home with young children, older children, big families, all at home under one roof, right? This multitasking concept is really big. So the task switching that our mind does actually has a significant, it provides a significant deficit for our work itself. People who significantly multitask, we see a 40% drop in productivity when we multitask. We see a 50% higher risk for having error with the work that we're doing. So you can start to see the challenge with this, right? When you start to load on the family component to that. So what do we do from a multitasking perspective? How do you do that when all those demands are so high? Well, the first thing that I do is, like I was sharing before a little bit with that rhythm and the structure, what we want to provide is we want to provide ourselves structure that has some flex to it, that has some give to it, because you can't set out some sort of extremely regimented schedule with kids. It's not going to happen. But you need to have a schedule that's consistent day to day, some kind of rhythm that allows us to fluctuate as needed. And one of the things that I find that's really beneficial with this, and this gets into how do we maintain focus, is when we're sitting at home and we're doing a lot of work from home and we have children, one of the biggest things that we all need is movement, especially kids, right? Sitting down, even if they're playing video games or if they're doing homework, we need to get up and we need to stretch and move our bodies. So I'm a big firm believer that family movement time is big. So what we do in our house is after a certain session of work time as a family, right? My daughter too doing her homework, is we go outside and I'll let her select from pieces of paper, right? We can do a jump rope time, we can have a dance party, or we can go outside and run around in circles. Sometimes if it's a bad day or if we're dealing with something where we can't go outside for some reason, we'll run around our kitchen island. We'll just run around in circles. One time is a bear, one time is a little penguin with little feet, something along those lines. So make it fun. You want to do something where movement becomes fun, and the child has the choice, right? The child can choose, or the children can choose what you want to do during that fun movement time. So movement interrupting the work schedule is really helpful. It gets a little bit of movement also for the shoulders, and it's really healthy for us as adults with ergonomic issues. So those are some ways that kind of let some steam off and come back to center.
And I would say that that's one of your colleagues, Karen Kirk. She joined us a couple of weeks ago talking about working from home, and she specifically said whether you're used to doing this in a normal work setting or now that you've kind of been stuck on your couch for a month or so, let me just remind you, get up and move. And she actually had another guest. So we had two guests on that day, but it was kind of like it was a guest of a guest. And he showed us how to, just 10 minutes or 5 minutes, if that's all you have, 2 or 3 5-minute things to, move your arms, rotate your shoulders, move your hips, do something, whether it's cardio or otherwise. But she didn't say to run around like a penguin. And so, yeah, my goodness, maybe we should all try that. Yeah. So I have a brother-in-law who used to make me laugh by demonstrating the difference between how a dungy crab walks versus how a king crab walks. And every time we'd go camping, and if I was in a pissy mood, which was probably more than I ever should have been, he'd always say, Heather, do you need to, you seem a bit crabby. Do we need to like break down how crabs walk? And it would always make me laugh. So I appreciate that you have a 7-year-old and that she probably really, really enjoys when you take these little breaks with her. But regardless, even if we have a 13-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 28-year-old living with us, we still do need to get up and move around. So I appreciate that tip and piece of advice as well, Woodrie.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I find it's also really helpful that I really appreciate what you said, Heather, because one of the big things that I find is we don't need a lot of time. We think we need these big swaths of time where we have like an hour break or something like that. It's amazing what 5 or 10 minutes will do to shift the mood, to shift the movement in the body, to make us feel better. And scattering those throughout our day can be really, really beneficial for us as working parents. It's a really big deal. Yeah. So tools. So what are some extra tools that we can look at? So one of the things that I want to talk about, we already talked about some of the energy and focus associated with movement, but what are some of those tools that are most useful for us in those times where we are kind of most stressed out at the very edge? How can we best support ourselves? Because we've all been there, right? So the thing that I find in those moments where I'm just really, really leaning hard on my edge is the first thing I do is just one, I become aware of it, right? And it seems like a really simple thing, but just being aware that I am at my edge is massively freeing. And the reason why it is because then if I can catch it, if I can catch that moment, I have a choice. I have a choice to continue what I'm doing. Maybe it's doing dishes and getting frustrated over whatever, or I can take a choice to just very briefly take a deep breath and maybe do something for myself in that moment that's going to help me. And my daughter knows this. So we have this thing in our house where if mom is starting to get really stressed out, I do 2 things. I take a deep, big glass of water and I take a few sips of water because that kind of flushes everything out and it helps. That cool, refreshing water is just helpful. And I had a psychologist tell me one time, he was sharing that one of the tips that he gives to his clients is actually to drink water because it helps kind of helps with the body, just regulation of emotions and things like that. So that's one of the things I do is I drink water. And then the second thing is I always do something to take care of myself, something that makes me joyful, something that makes me happy. It can be minor, but something that makes me happy in that moment. And almost always it's music for me. And so everybody in my house knows that when mommy's at her edge, 2 things happen. I drink water and I turn on mama music. And so what's great about that, and what I think is really important as parents, is that when we take good care of ourselves like that, and we acknowledge the challenge that we're in, and then we do something positive to support ourselves in that challenge, we're not only tending to ourselves, but we are actually providing a beautiful gift to our kids. We're actually teaching them and modeling to them how to tend to ourselves. And I think that that's something that we oftentimes overlook. So I think instead of hiding behind this concept that we need to be perfect and everything's going to be great as parents, it's okay to realize that there's hard times and that when we're in those hard times, how do we deal with it? So that's something that always makes me feel a little bit better during my stressful times. The other thing that I think is really big, and this is one of the things that I think we all also overlook, is celebrating our wins. We have all of these great times, and we've gotten used to in our family when we have a moment where we're having a lot of fun, where we are playing a board game, or we're going outside and we're on a walk, or we're on a hike, or we're doing something and we're just giggling and laughing and we're having a tickle party or whatever we're doing in the moment. When we're in that moment, we call those our golden moments, right? Those are beautiful moments. And we kind of take a pause and I'm like, hey, you guys, guess what? We're in a golden moment right now. And this is one of those moments to just everybody kind of take a pause to realize how much fun and how much joy we're having in that moment. And I think that those are also really important things to fill us up during times that are difficult. How do we fill ourselves up and acknowledge that filling up and nourishment of ourselves and our families during these difficult times? So we acknowledge them. And then maybe we can think on the side, well, what got us here? Oh, I took that 15-minute break. Like, this is a random moment where we're walking like penguins around the kitchen table and having a blast, just taking the time to acknowledge it. So that awareness piece being really, really big. So yeah, Heather.
Well, I have one observation and then I have a question from a viewer. So the observation was taking time to celebrate or taking the time to sort of relish in a good moment. I think that that's good for us, whether we're working from home or we're at the office. But another tool that our viewers might appreciate, especially with older children that are processing, because they're watching us and they're absorbing virtually everything we do, and so they're watching us be our professional selves, right? Which is a different role that they see us in. Usually they just see us be our parenting selves or our coaching selves or whatever, but now they're watching us be professionals. And so one of the things that I started to do with my son, who is 13, right? So much older than your daughter, Woodrie, but I started twice a day having a auditory journaling moment, right? So, hey, let's check in, what's going well this morning? What are we happy about? What are we concerned about? And is there anything that we're proud of in this last, right? Something to celebrate in this last 4 hours. And so even when I've been at home, I have to be cognizant, or I here at work, sorry, I have to be cognizant of the fact that he's still at home. And he's, a 13-year-old extrovert, very social kid that's been home alone for really quite a bit in these last 2 months. And so I've been checking in with him with this auditory journaling because I think it's helpful when he sees me do that in my professional life and, kind of processing things in blocks of time. And I think it has given him something to reflect upon and make perhaps a small little adjustment as to how he goes about his afternoon. So that might be helpful for viewers as well. But the question that came in, Woodrie, was, as I read it, because Marshall's moderating for us today, how do we keep from being distracted when you're at home and you're working from home? There are a gazillion distractions, clearly. It could be laundry, it could be cooking, it could be the bread dough that's rising, it could be the child. But how do you keep focused on the one thing that you wanted to complete or the one thing that needed 100% of your mental energy when you've got bees buzzing around you?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, Heather, I also really loved what you said about the journal. Great auditory journaling. Lovely. So that's a great question. And there's a couple things that I have the tendency to do. I think a lot of times we have so many demands. And when we look at all of the demands and all the priorities and all the obligations that we have in our day, I like to really outline them, put them all down on a list, right? Wherever you do that, if it's on a piece of paper, if it's in OneNote, whatever tool you're utilizing, put them all down and identify which few, right? This is one of those time management techniques. Which one of those few is most vital for you for that day or for that block of time if you're scheduling out your time in specific segments. And if it's one thing, and you've got all the other bees buzzing around and everything else you're doing, right? That's all that multitasking versus single tasking, right? So when we look at that, you just keep coming back to that one item. And if anybody's interrupting or if anybody's saying anything, say, oh, I've got 10 more minutes of this, set a timer, do something along those lines to say, I'm going to finish this up. If you have the flexibility to do this, not everybody does. Not everybody has a secondary partner at home. A lot of folks are single parents, right? And so it's all on their shoulders. So how to do that effectively in those moments? You utilize your tools, whatever those are. If there's a specific homework class, if there's a specific time, if you can schedule it, going back to that scheduling concept, if you can schedule that focus time in a time that your child is going to be occupied, maybe they have a Zoom online class, or maybe they have an art class or something that you signed up for online for them. Maybe they have some kind of music class or something, or maybe they're just watching cartoons, or maybe they're doing a video game or something like that. If you have that block, that's the time to utilize it for those most important, highest priority items that you have. So a combination of scheduling as well as focus time mentally. The other thing that helps us focus is a combination of, this is where meditation and mindfulness can become so valuable. Because meditation and mindfulness, when you do it over time, it's all about bringing the mind back to the present moment, right here, right now. So if we find ourselves trailing over here and saying, oh, well, I should go do this, or, oh, I should go do this, we bring ourselves right back to the point at hand, the moment, the task, the workload at hand. And all of those mind training techniques that arise from mindfulness and meditation can be really helpful in a work setting because it can improve your creativity, it can improve your concentration, and it can improve your focus. So that would be the other area that I would be looking at. Some really good apps for that include Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer is pretty decent, although it doesn't have any guided meditations. Headspace is probably the best one that I've found for that. Yeah. So I think we're just about wrapping up. Heather, was there anything else that you wanted to share or ask?
There wasn't, and I just did a little toggle back and forth. I'm like, is that her last set of frequently asked questions? It seemed to just fly by. So no, there weren't any other questions for the audience. I think just an observation, Woodrie, is what you're offering today is super, super helpful, whether we're at work or at home, because the fact of the matter is taking care of ourselves or the people that we care about. That doesn't go away just because we, are starting to drive to the office, and we still have to be really mindful of what's going on at home and the things that are distracting us from, I don't know, whatever, whether it's our own self-care or their care. We've got to be really mindful and thoughtful of purposefully taking care of them. And so I appreciate your guidance and your insight. I'd also appreciate, as I do almost every time you're a guest with us, is you are so positive and so optimistic and so calm that you're like you're like a meditation app, right? Who needs calm or who needs mind space or whatever? I just have Woodrie, anytime I need you, I just hop on over to a webinar. So, but I would assume that channeling our inner Woodrie would help us through any stressful time, whether it's in the time of COVID and pandemics or whether it's, a deadline is coming up and we're feeling a little bit harried for that. But either way, I just appreciate you, and I'm just glad that you're here. So anyway,
and I would also do with you. So thank you.
Just a little love fest right here on our daily webinar. Right. Anyway, so again, if you're a viewer, thanks for joining us today. We're right at 30 minutes, and so we didn't keep you more than we had promised we would. You can visit thestrivegroup.com for this session on playback or any other previously recorded sessions. All of them have the names of our guests. So if you're particularly interested in something else that Woodrie has done for us, or if you're interested in the one that I referenced with Karen Kirk, all of them have our names tagged to them. So, and they're all pretty well labeled as well. So you'll get a feel for what that 30 minutes entails by looking at that long list. But there's over 50 30-minute webinars. The ones that I did are a little long because I have a tendency to ramble, as I'm doing right now, so I won't. But if you have any ideas for future webinars, or if you'd like to see something in our future programming, please feel free to reach out at info@thestrivegroup.com. And I encourage you all to stay as positive and optimistic, almost as positive and optimistic as our wonderful guest here is today. It would be nice if we could all be like Woodrie. So here is a little bit about Woodrie, but I'll turn it back over to her so she can tell you a little bit about what she does and what she offers to her clients, and then we'll bid you farewell.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you all so much for joining. It's been a total pleasure being here today. I so appreciate the Strive Group and everything you guys do. It's been a real pleasure, Heather, to be with you guys during these and for putting these on. What a great resource for folks. In terms of things about me, like I mentioned before, I've been doing this for doing coaching and presentations specifically. I do a lot of speaking and workshop facilitation for organizations, and I've been doing that for about 10 years in the space specifically of work boundaries, how to set those effectively, how to take really, really good care of the self, what self-care looks like in the workplace. I do a lot of individual coaching on that as well as organizational coaching. And we're getting ready to launch, actually I'm really, really excited about something. We're getting ready to launch a journal as well. And that'll be available in the next month or so, all about resilience, self-care, and boundary setting in the workplace. So you can follow us on Facebook. Yeah, super excited about it. So
that's you should be. You should be.
Yeah.
I have a friend who lives in Vermont. She's very similar to you. I would say that out of all of my network, you two are probably the most similar, but she has gratefulness and gratitude journals. So her
Lovely.
business is all about mindfulness and gratefulness. So you'd probably enjoy her. I should introduce you. So
Yeah, that's great.
anyway. All right. Well, goodbye, everybody, and have a great Memorial Day weekend. And thanks again, Woodrie.
Bye. Thank you.